both about the exam if you're doing the end of year exam and if you're an affiliate doing the end of the exam in return. You're going to get to the affiliate exam a little bit later because it's sort of relevant to put it in the context of the main exam. So the end of year exam, by the way, you should either now have or be very soon getting your mid-term exam results. They should come out Friday, but I think they're going to come out today, actually. So they might have just come out.
No,
Which might be a good incentive for you to pay particularly careful attention, since I noticed that the results were particularly disappointing this year.
Oh, wow.
They were substantially worse than the last couple of years. I don't quite know why. Maybe you're all maybe you were all the people who did really well then. Some people did well, but I think the average mark was 55.
55.
The average is what? 55.
Out of 100. That's No, they really where?
Format, you can check the later, they're not going to change, but at the end of this session I'm going to walk out the door and you can't talk with me later because I would have told you all. I'm just going to say refer to your lecture notes. If you do well, you'll be fine. If you didn't do so well, you might want to listen. Okay, look, the exam starts off with MCQ questions, which is why you had a set of MCQs in your midterm exam. So you get used to the format of those questions. It's so that you know how to fill out the MCQ card correctly, because that in itself is a slight art. And there's 15 MCQs and they're 5-part questions, just like the ones that you had in your midterm exam. Okay? And that's worth, I think, something like 40% of your exam overall. That's worth 40% of your total mark. I'll come back to those in a minute because they're kind of important. Then there's a kind of a data analysis question. This is section A. I should have said this is section B. There's some sort of data analysis, which is, you know, you do some simple calculations, you plot a graph. Sometimes it's related to the practicals we've done, sometimes it's not. You plot a bit of data and you've got to show you can plot it sensibly, you can think about the answers. Here are some questions if that's something to analyse about it. And that's worth about 20% of your mark. And then there's section C, which is a set of one-page answers, which I have some examples of, I think. Yes, I can show you some examples later. These are things where you have one-page answers. So you've got to limit your answer to a single page. Okay, so it's quite short. I've only got a page to write in. And that is, of course, worth 40%. And you get some choice. You've got to do 2 from 4 questions. There's 4 questions there. You've got to pick 2 of them that you like the look of and answer them. And they're worth 40%. So that's format of the exam, I'll show you some example past questions so you get an idea. It should always be possible to write your answer in a single page. Even with quite big handwriting, I know some people have tiny handwriting, some people have large handwriting, but you must focus your answer. You cannot take the time to write a nice long introductory paragraph. If you're asked about the pharmacology of local anesthetics, let's say, and you happen to know a little bit about the history, they were first discovered, blah, 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 cocaine was one of the first ones, whatever you happen to know about it, and it's not actually really relevant, it's a bit of history, it's not really relevant to the pharmacology, you're going to run out of space. So every year, people run out of space, and they write over one page, and then most often what happens is the second page is crossed out because it has all the correct answers in, and the first page is marked, and they score some very high mark. It's actually at the discretion of the external examiner what happens, and the external examiner changes, and some external examiners say, mark the first page that you see, some external examiners say, mark the best page, the best fraction of the page. You know, if they've done, say, 3 pages, and page 3 happens to have most of the information that you're looking for in, ignore the first 2 pages. You know, I can't predict for you exactly what they will say this year. They have different views on it, different interpretations of the regulations, but it wouldn't be a surprise if any mark over the first page is just crossed out. If you are writing on that page and you start on you writing your text, and then you decide, oh, this is a good place to put that interesting history of local anesthetics that I know about, and you start writing them. And then you cast your mind back suddenly to this session, and you think, oh no, actually I don't want to put that in, and you start another page over here. That's fine. You can get one page like this on 2 actual physical pages of the exam answer. Yeah.
In terms of your one-page answers, it has to be in paragraphs, and you just bullet point the most important things.
Yeah. So every year people ask that. That's a good question. That's one of the things that I wanted to go over with you. You can bullet point the key fact, but you've got to be a bit careful about it. What you have to think about is somebody marking this script I've got to convince them that I know the answer to this question. Okay? So if I say, tell me about schizophrenia, and you put dopamine, and that's it, or, a dopamine, and then antagonism, and then, I don't know, something else, the brain. It may be that you actually know, you could expand on those points. You could say, loss of dopaminergic transmission in the brain, Parkinson's, excess dopamine maybe leads to schizophrenia, and the evidence for this is dopamine leads to antagonism, or you might go on. But I don't know any of that if I'm marking it. I just look at the words there, and I don't know if you just remembered a few kind of keywords, and you have no context for them or no meaning for them. So if you feel you might run out of space, you can put down bullet points if you wish, but in doing it, I would try and make it extremely clear that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so the pharmacology of local anesthetics, you might say the key points about pharmacology of local anesthetics are bullet point 1, they have voltage-dependent block or they act on voltage-gated sodium channels. Bullet point 2, they have voltage-dependent block of those channels because they're charged. Bullet point 3, they're physically quite poor. Bullet point 4, they have use-dependent block. Bullet point 5, they can be administered in various ways, or they can be administered epidural surface anesthesia. You could go through it, but you've got to make it sufficiently readable that somebody marking that can award the marks to you. Okay, if the bullet points are sometimes people write bullet points and they're just too brief know that that person understands that topic. So that's the sort of danger of writing bullet points. So I would say, I wouldn't if I could avoid it, but there are ways of doing it that can perfectly clearly communicate what you know, that you understand the topic and you can get full marks. It's not an automatic, you know, there's nothing automatically preventing you getting full marks just because you wrote bullet points. I'll get back to this bit in a moment. Any questions about this format? Yeah,
Would the multiple choice questions be negatively marked or not?
multiple choice questions are negatively marked. So this raises a very important point. So let's go over that point. So MCQ questions are negatively marked. They are not exactly the kind that you've already done in the test. You've got question 1, say, and you've got A, B, C, D, E, all related to one particular theme, and you mark each one true, false, or don't know. Okay, if you mark true or false and you're right, you get +1. If you mark don't know, you get nothing. It doesn't count positively for you or negatively for you. Because of the possibility that somebody could just guess their answers, and you've got a 50-50 chance of being right, on average, I would expect someone who was just guessing, if I didn't have negative marking, to get 20% on the exam. They've only got to get 40% to pass. So it wouldn't be a very good test of your knowledge of pharmacology. So this way, on average, they get 0. But this analysis, so I used to say to people, and I'll explain why in a moment, if you don't know the answer, just put don't know, put the cross through the don't know, and then you can't get any marks taken away from you. Now I said, and a colleague of mine, because we're scientists, we like to argue, and he said, you are doing an almost criminal disservice to your students. You are giving them the worst possible advice. He was very, very vociferous in this view. And his argument, and he said, you should always guess the answer. You should always guess the answer, almost always anyway. And his argument is this. Supposing I've got a set of MCQ questions, right? And I've got the chances of getting them right is 0.5. My probability of getting them right is 0.5. Then, on average, with negative marking, +1 mark every time I get it right, and -1 mark every time I get it wrong, then on average, I'll score 0. Okay? So it doesn't do you any, it doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't help you to guess if this is true. I don't disagree with him on that particular point. Now comes the tricky bit. He argues that actually this p-value of 1/2, he might have a 50-50 chance of guessing the right answer, is not the true p-value, because it's likely that you know something about the subject, right? So he says actually, probably, he is not 0.5, but actually 0.6. You've got a slightly more chance of guessing the correct answer than somebody who knows nothing about the subject. Right? I would kind of hope that would be true, actually. You know? And that means, if that's true, you know a little bit more than someone who doesn't know anything, then you've got a greater than 50-50 chance of getting the right answer. And that means that if you use that little bit of knowledge on all of those questions, and P is 0.6 of getting it right, then when you go through them all, you won't get 0 as an average, but you'll get something slightly positive. Right? You'll end up, if P is not 0.5, but actually 0.6 of you getting the right answer, then you would end up with a slight positive score. So this is his argument. So I kind of leave that with you. You can guess that if you want, but let me put to you what I put to him as the counter-argument to that. And my counter-argument to that, and why I don't believe I was giving my students very bad advice when I told them to what don't know, is that I never phrase a question so that it's implausible. I never phrase a question, you know, a suitable treatment for Alzheimer's disease is to eat a lot of Big Macs, or something like this, right? I always say something plausible. You know, I would treat asthma with an adrenoceptor antagonist. So you might think, yeah, I kind of remember that. There's something about adrenoceptors, the lungs. But is it an agonist or an antagonist that I treat that with? In my opinion, a little knowledge is dangerous. And in that circumstance, when you don't know, I hope my answers, whether they're true or false, my questions, whether they're true or false, both answers sound plausible if you don't really remember the full kind of circumstances of the answer. I hope they do. That's certainly what I intend to do when I write them. So, I actually don't believe it's this. I think actually it could be something like this. And if that happens, then every guess you make, you would on average not score 0, but actually on average you would score less than 0. You would start to get a negative mark. And the other reason I kind of worry about this factor is most of the time when people have occasionally come to see me about MCQ tests that they've compared with, they say, I really kind of knew that worked pretty well. I don't understand why I've scored loading. And usually the way it happens, there's some question, I don't know, about some topic, and they absolutely know the answer to question A. Definitely. Got it, nailed it. Question B, same story, absolutely know it. Question C, brilliant, definitely know it. Okay, question D and E, they're not quite so sure on. So at the moment, there they are, 3 out of 5, that's 60%. They've got a 2-1 on their score as it stands. Now, they tend to take a guess. I think that, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how another guess. Yeah, I think that's probably right. And now, they've ended up with 20%, which is quite a bad fail. So you have gone from getting a very respectable 2-1 to taking your mark down to a fail, quite a bad fail. So, I leave it entirely up to you. Probably whether this probability sits here or sits here varies with the question and with the individual. So I've compromised with this colleague of mine, and I always now explain both his thinking and my own thinking, and I leave it to people to make their own choice about what strategy they want to take in the exam. But I would be, so somebody, the world record, nobody managed to beat it this year, but the world record lowest score for the pharmacology midterm test is -38%. Right, don't worry about it, nobody managed to pass it this year. In fact, I think everyone's mark was positive. just. People were a bit close to the wire, but everyone's mark was positive. You can work out how unlikely it is. So when you're guessing, when you're just taking a guess, of course you can sometimes be lucky, or you can sometimes be unlucky. And this is another reason why this colleague of mine says you should always guess. So particularly if you know nothing, you may as well guess, and you might get lucky and get a pass. I actually think that would kind of devalue the whole degree if people did that. But anyway, it's unlikely, they're unlikely to get a pass. But I guess that's the thing for your own conscience. But if you work out the probability of getting this far from 0 by just guessing with p equal 0.5, actually getting this far from 0 is quite difficult. You would need quite high numbers of students to just pick up this number at random, and presumably, yeah.
I was just going to say that I don't see how p could ever be 0.45, because it's suggesting that anything you know is working against you just a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't see how that could.
Okay, well that's fine. Do this. I mean, I honestly, I do think it's like, you know, a suitable treatment for asthma would be, you know, an adrenoceptor antagonist. And somebody thinks to themselves, yeah, asthma, adrenoceptors, yeah, that's, I absolutely remember that. Tick, next one. And that's, of course, the wrong answer. So I think it can work, but, you know, it does depend on your individual approach to things. And so, yeah, if you think it's here, go ahead and guess. That's why I'm explaining both strategies to you. Yes?
Will we get our test back to see what questions we got wrong?
No.
No?
I never release MCQ questions, and even on the past exam papers, they're not released.
Why?
Why? Because it's very difficult to write unambiguous MCQ questions about your course. About any course, in fact. It's very, very difficult. It might not sound very difficult, but when you try it, you'll find out that it is difficult if you're not examining the trivial. And so, if we wrote them and released them every time, then we have to keep rewriting them as because we have a big pool of them and we kind of circulate them through. We'd have to keep regenerating that pool, and it would soon get very difficult.
But how does that contribute to my learning?
How
If
does
I'm
it
not able,
contribute
if
to
I'm not able to see what I got wrong in the test, so that I can do well next time.
Well, I guess the answer is you just have to, you know, learn more about the subject. Or, I mean, it depends if you become comfortable about the things. You know, there's nothing on the test that isn't taught to you, and pretty clearly. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything kind of conceptually that difficult. But if you had areas which were conceptually difficult, you come back, yeah? Sorry? No, that's what I'm saying. I don't do that. If I release the questions, I'd release the answers for you. There wouldn't be any point in keeping the questions. Not the answers. The answers would be pretty obvious. Yeah, sorry, that is difficult. Sorry. Well, maybe if you scored an overall, maybe scored minus 30%. Any other questions? Any other questions on the MCQ? Okay. I'm still going to go back to your exam. If there are any affiliates, then your questions are all drawn from past papers. So you can see all your potential exam questions by looking at the past papers. There's quite a lot to see though, yeah.
Sorry, what's an affiliate?
An affiliate is someone who's here just for one term, or sometimes they're here for the whole year, but if you're here for the whole year, you just sit the end of year exam with everyone else. Because for students who are visiting UCL just for one term, so the exam is this Friday, on Friday first thing in the morning. So if you're not on file 1001, but you're actually on file 1001A, then this is information for you. I think there's only 1 or 2 people on it this year. So the point is that you have a choice. You have 7 questions that you have to answer 4, and they're all from past papers. So if you learn all the questions on the past papers, then you'll definitely do very well on that exam. But you don't have very much time to learn it because, of course, the exam is this Friday.
Yeah, so the past papers are just from section B and C. And so do you know what sort of topics are going to come up in section A of that year?
Sorry.
I'm asking if, like, obviously you're not going to reveal past papers of section A, but do you have a rough idea of what sort of topics will come up?
The whole course is examinable in section A. So section B and C are there so you can demonstrate some particular talent, either you're good at data analysis or maybe you've got some in-depth knowledge that you know about certain topics. Okay, that's a chance to do that. But the first section is all about showing you that you picked up something right across the course. So I try to cover everything. I mean, you can't cover everything, but cover quite a lot. It's all stuff you've done. It's stuff that you haven't already done. Or, I mean, yeah. Sorry. After this term now, you're into all your other stuff. The really boring.
Would it be possible for you to give us like a model question and then a model answer that would be wordy first? For example, word full marks, just to sort of get an idea of what we're supposed to include and
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about those sorts of things. I've got some past questions. I'll show you some and we can talk through them. Let me just try and
I'll be happy with 40 for that anyway.
and you've got here 1 page of space. So, people can't expect miracles. But on the other hand, the key, I would say again, the key which people forget every year is from that first sentence, you are focusing your answer. You are, if the sentence you've just written doesn't answer the question, cross it out. Because there's a waste of space. You haven't got much space. But if you use it wisely, you can do it. And as I say, you can do bullet points if you want, if you need to save more space. I mean, the other thing to do is you can go to the library and you can, click on the library website and you can download past papers, not the MCQs, but you can download the short answers. And you can just, prepare little short answers to those questions and think about what would I write in my one page. I've only got limited time, so what are the key points about that?
Or were you expected to give examples as well, so that when you gave your example of discuss local anesthetics?
Local anesthetics, yeah, often it will ask you to, discuss the pharmacology of local anesthetics and give 2 named examples, or discuss the pharmacology of anti-HIV agents and give 2 named examples, or antibiotics working by different mechanisms and give 2 named examples. Yeah.
How much time are you going to have?
Sorry?
How much time are you going to have?
You have 2 hours to do the whole thing, and just like the midterm exam, that's usually bags of time. That's usually ample time. It is not usually I don't try and set the exam to be a speed race. It's not a test to see how far you can get down this paper. Usually there is plenty of time. So if you can't remember some of the information that you need in MCQs, then just make a note of it, come back to it, you'll have time. Other parts of the exam paper might even prompt you on it. Maybe the shorter answers will make you think about something which will then jog your memory and you can go back and read it, and you'll be able to tackle it. So things like that. Some reason.
If you got it wrong, that means you lost 4%.
So one thing I noticed in the follow-up class to guinea pig ileum experiments was in the instructions I drew things up using a log scale, but I marked them in ordinary numbers, so maybe we could get a shear plot or something. And then along the bottom here, the concentrations I marked as 1, 10, 100, 1000. And that confused some people because they wanted to see 1, 2, 3, or 0, 1, 2, 3, or something like this. Are you all happy with what I did here? I could have written down these numbers. I could have written down, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. But I wanted to write down these, which are the actual concentrations. And you often see that happening in the literature. People write down these concentrations just because technically you shouldn't take a log of a concentration. So people sort of worm out of it. So you need to know the units. So if you mark in here 1, 2, 3, and you've got log concentration, that's not very good because your concentration could be in molar or nanomolar or something, and these would represent very different values. So you need to put units. And I wrote them in a slightly different style, so I could just put the numbers straight in. Okay, and I can't remember, I probably put nanomolar or something like this. Is that okay? Is anyone still confused about that? Comfortable with that? So, some past questions, pharmacology. Pharmacology of local anaesthetics. Write short notes on that. What are you going to write about? If I wanted to teach someone about the pharmacology of local anaesthetics, what's the most important thing I can tell them? Yeah.
Structure.
The structure of local anaesthetics? Yeah, possibly. Why is that important?
They all follow a generic structure.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Some structures would last longer in the body. Most like other structures in the
Yeah, okay. Actually, I don't think that is a terribly high priority. But yes, it could be mentioned, yeah.
Probably mechanism of action.
Mechanism of action, that's got to be number one. Mechanism of action. That's what pharmacology is about. How do drugs work? Of course, there are aspects of this mechanism which feed into this structure. Not just because something has to have the right structure in order to bind to the sodium channel, but also because local anaesthetics are partially charged. Why is that important? Yeah.
The Chatelier's principle and entering of the thing itself, where it forms HA minus HA.
Yeah, so they're partially charged, which means in their uncharged form they can cross the cell membrane and they can block the channel from the inside. Okay? So that's why I think structure is kind of important. Then I might put that, yeah.
like the different applications of it, so the different
Yeah, uses. What are their pharmacological uses? And there's a range of different ways in which they can be applied for different conditions, and you can say a little bit about that. And that would stack the page full quite comfortably. And you might give some names. So mechanism, there's quite a lot there. They target sodium channels, they block for, we do voltage dependent block. I don't know if you've done that. You're rarely asked to put down data you actually haven't covered in the lectures or in sort of source material that you're given in the lecture notes. You know, if you're asked to read something, obviously, then you should read it. Use dependent block. Most blocks are two pathways, you might mention. One is via the membrane and the other one from inside the cell. I don't really talk about the structures insofar as it helps me explain the mechanisms. I would definitely talk about the drugs, uses, and I think that would fill a page. I would think I would get a very good mark. So then explain what is meant by personalized medicine and illustrate this idea using suitable examples. So that's a question which is designed to give you lots of scope. So what is meant by personalised medicine? Yeah.
Medicine that's tuned to specific, it could be the pharmacogenomics of a person.
Yeah, it's tuned to that, it literally is, it's tuned to that individual, that person's condition, rather than a generic condition. So, where are some examples of personalised medicine? Yeah.
Cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is an example where actually there are drugs which are now appear to be pretty effective if you, so CF is a genetic disorder, you may remember, and there are some drugs which are quite effective if you carry particular mutations of the CFTR ion channel, but they're not very effective if you don't have those particular mutations. So that's an example of where medication can be personalised. I think you may have done something maybe about statins. Your choice of statin might vary depending on whether you have certain genetics again. Have you done cholinesterase inhibitors? I think that's maybe another example you've got. Possibly even some cancers. Did you do some cancers? I'm not sure. I think the lecture got changed a little bit this year, so I haven't looked to see what it.
Breast cancer.
Sorry?
Breast.
Breast cancer, yeah, thank you. So that's another good example where, again, they look for certain mutations and see if your cancer is likely to be susceptible to that treatment. So you can pick out some examples, you can explain what that is. You can't say a huge amount about them. It's not a bad idea to make notes on the exam paper about your answers to each one before you write it down in your answer booklet, or maybe to make notes in your answer booklet and cross it out. But then that will help to organise your thoughts about your answer. And so you can prioritise these. So you can prioritise which of these you're going to talk about. Maybe the hierarchy of ethanol in humans. That's another question that might come up. Came up last year, so maybe it will, maybe it won't this year. But you know, again, it's fairly defined. You can start to talk about, you know, there are probably multiple targets. Something about it's not kinetic, it's slow, it's going to get rid of it. Some of that thing about its, maybe its unpleasant side effects. A little bit about what these specific targets might be. This is quite interesting, this little bit here, because other animals are not as susceptible to the influence of alcohol as humans are. Somebody wants to point out to me that if you literally were as pissed as a newt, you would probably be dead by a factor of 20. Anyway, you probably won't want to include that in your short so those are sort of the sorts of questions you get, and you know, it helps you to go through past mechanisms and maybe jot down priorities. But usually, if you're talking about the pharmacology, unless it's specifically a question, some questions are aimed about mechanism. Some questions are particularly aimed about uses, give the diverse uses of local anesthetics or something like that. Unless it is aimed like that and it's just talking about the pharmacology, you want to start with mechanisms of action. Okay, how do things act? What are their targets? Is it known? Any questions about the exam that I have not covered? Yeah.
How many data analysis questions do you have?
You just have, it's just one
Just one.
multi-part. And last year, for the first time, the external examiner insisted that we break down, so there used to be sort of part A, part B, part C, and they would all have roughly the same amount of marks associated with them, but we didn't ever specify them. We didn't specify the marks, and last year the external examiner wanted us to specify the marks. So the only thing I'm flagging up to you is look at the past exam papers, but it's possible the external examiner can insist that we place slightly different wording in the way you're supposed to approach the questions, or that we have to put slightly different marking, slightly different numbers of marks associated. They can make small changes to the way the exam paper looks. So if you get yourself familiar with the past exam papers, that's probably very helpful, because it's probably not going to change dramatically, but there can be changes. So make sure you read the paper. Do make sure you read the paper. I know probably everyone told you that at school, and every time you sit an exam, people tell you read the paper. But it's really, really true, and particularly in this exam, when there's loads of time, there's plenty of time to read the paper carefully and make sure, and reread it, and make sure you know exactly what kind of information people are looking for. Any other questions? Otherwise, the next time I might see you, it could be nervously standing outside that exam hall waiting to go in. And when we're in the exam hall, hopefully I won't have any questions to answer. Okay, thank you.